We're about to talk about the European Union with Ross Clark, who's written a piece in The Sun today on page 10 because the EU reset is well underway. The headline says, was it Starmer's plan all along to make us so subservient to the EU we'd be better off back in? Well, I mean, it's a very good question. Certainly, as the Sun leader says this morning, Donald Trump sort of showed the world how to force a deal with the European Union. But Keir Starmer doesn't seem to have a clue how to do the same thing. Ross, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
I mean, we've always known, despite what he said, that Keir Starmer loves the European Union and wanted a second referendum and would have us back in it if he could actually figure out a way of doing so. So perhaps your theory that he's trying to just make it so awful, our relationship with them, that people will say, well, I might as well just rejoin. I wonder if that's his real endgame.
Yes, well, I mean, Keir Starmer, of course, throughout the Brexit negotiations was campaigning for a second referendum, which he hoped the British public would reverse the result of the first one.
Yes.
Which was never certain anyway. But anyway, that was his game. He gave up on that when we left. But did he give up on Britain? His aim for Britain one day to rejoin the EU and just go about it in a different strategy by bringing us closer and closer to Europe until such times as fully rejoining the Bloc sort of becomes a kind of tidying up exercise. Now we're getting more and more details now of the reset between the UK and the EU, and it doesn't make very pleasant reading. I mean, what is being proposed is just affects sort of food and animal plant products at the moment, but it's to create a common sanitary and phyto-sanitary area, which essentially means that Britain would just follow EU regulations on food, plants, agriculture and so on, and so that would obviate the need for border checks, which sounds a good idea because it's a load of footling bureaucracy when you import or export stuff. So but what it does, of course, is it then takes away Britain's ability to make its own rules on these matters.
Well, because effectively there is a border, because the border is the regulation, isn't it? Because in effect, unless you're regulated by the EU, unless your product matches what it is that they want it to match, then you can't export it.
Yes, well, not only that, you wouldn't be able to sell it in this country either. I mean, what we're sort of essentially agreeing to is to adopt EU regulations on these things for all our, whether you're exporting, importing, or whether you're producing stuff for food for consumption in Britain, we'd all have to obey rules which are essentially made in Brussels.
Right.
And Britain might have some there might be some consultation go on, but it's essentially the EU which will be making the rules. We just have to accept them, and if there's a dispute, it would get considered by what's called an independent tribunal, but the ultimate arbiter of what is acceptable and what not acceptable is the European Court of Justice, an EU institution. So
we haven't really got much in sort of in favour of this deal for us, from our point of view. We haven't really got anything in return, have we?
Well, I mean, in our favour is that it would do away with the border checks and make it smoother to import, export food and so on. But, it comes at a very heavy price of essentially undermining one of the, if not the most important aspect of Brexit, which was to take back control.
Well,
we're going to hand back a lot of control.
Right, as you point out in the piece, EU legislators, heavily lobbied by French farmers and the like, will pass laws which are designed to discriminate against UK-made produce in order to keep it out of EU markets. So, their end game is pretty obvious. They want to try and actually limit the amount of stuff that we can sell in Europe because they don't want it as competition.
No, exactly. And this was going on during our membership of the EU. I mean, if you remember the battle over chocolate. The EU wanted to ban chocolate which was made with a certain level of vegetable fats, a certain level of milk, and which just happened to, the regulations they proposed just happened to permit French and Belgian-made chocolate, but exclude the sort of chocolate bars that are made in Britain. And that went on for years and years, ever since we joined the EU in 1973, until it was finally resolved in 2000, and that was resolved in Britain's favour. But then we were members of the EU, and of course, under the proposed arrangements, we won't have the seat at the table. So the EU will sort of make sure it wins those kinds of battles.
Yeah,
So,
it's just more failure and hopelessness from this government, I'm afraid. Ross, we've got to leave it there, I'm afraid. Thank you very much indeed. Ross Clark with a piece in the Sun today about the EU reset. Was it Starmer's plan all along to make us so subservient to the European Union we'd be better off back in? I wouldn't be surprised if that was the plan. But it's, once again, completely bungled by our Prime Minister.